I'm Ivan Doloto, and this is my personal project about Russia, society, politics, law, and human rights. In today's broadcast, I want to talk about the unexpected emergence in Russia of a politician who presents himself as nothing less than the head of a new Russian opposition, coming to replace Alexei Navalny against the backdrop of the Kremlin's repressive policies toward internet freedom and citizens' rights to freely receive and disseminate information. This is truly a remarkable phenomenon, and so far no one understands what is behind it, or how such a thing could happen under the Kremlin's absolute control over the opposition and any manifestations of dissent. Nevertheless, this happened just a few days ago, and it truly deserves attention. We are talking about a former pro-Kremlin blogger who worked for Putin's administration, but unexpectedly switched to the opposition against the Kremlin. Just a few days ago, he gave an interview to the well-known Russian blogger Ksenia Sobchak.
Hello?
Hello, Ksenia.
A few days ago, you were released from a psychiatric hospital, where you ended up immediately after your public speech. One could even say your act of defiance against Vladimir Putin's policies. To start, I want to ask you how you are feeling now.
I feel absolutely wonderful, truly fantastic, and I fully intend and plan to steadily carry on with the important work I first began on March 17th.
We're talking about Ilya Remeslo, a person who for many years was not just a supporter of the system, but one of its active public instruments. He fought against Alexei Navalny, wrote denunciations, participated in campaigns against the opposition, and worked within the logic of the Kremlin machine. According to his own words, he carried out projects aimed at combating the political opponents of the authorities.
Ilya Remeslo is a Russian blogger and a lawyer by education, who is more often referred to in the media as a pro-government informant and the person behind the criminal case against Alexei Navalny. He was born in Nalchik on September 5, 1983. In 2005, he graduated from St. Petersburg State University. In 2010, he began to build his public image around fighting against Navalny and his associates. For years, he published investigations, filed complaints with law enforcement agencies, participated in court cases, and pushed for new probes against politicians and their organizations. In February 2022, Ilya Remeslo testified as a prosecution witness at Navalny's trial, which took place in the Vladimir region. In addition, he regularly spoke out against journalists, artists, and opposition activists, submitting complaints about them to the prosecutor's office, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the Ministry of Justice. On March 17, 2026, Ilya Remeslo unexpectedly published a post sharply criticizing the special military operation and Vladimir Putin personally. 2 days after that, he ended up in Psychiatric Hospital No. 3 in St. Petersburg, where he spent 30 days. This is his first interview after being released.
And now this same person says that he feels sorry for Navalny. He says he feels a sense of guilt. He says he himself will build a beautiful Russia of the future. He criticizes Putin. And after this criticism, he ends up in a psychiatric hospital.
On March 18th, when I was hospitalized in the evening, I was just sitting there, not really doing anything in particular. I had given an interview to Plyushchov, and I was absolutely coherent during it. Everyone saw that, you know. At around 11:30, people from the ambulance arrived for me, accompanied by the police. That's it. They came in and told me directly in plain language that my texts accordingly were stirring up society, that there was public outrage. By the way, your last name was mentioned, Ksenia, for some reason. I don't know why. Apparently they read you. That's it. So they didn't ask how I was feeling, what my mood was, or anything like that. They were interested exclusively in my texts about Vladimir Putin.
And do you know who called for the ambulance there?
I can't answer that question since it would violate my personal medical confidentiality. I didn't call them.
And this is where the most important part begins, because this story isn't just about Remeslo. It's about a system that has become so deranged, so used to grinding people down, that at some point it even starts grinding down its own former functionaries.
But what was the critical point? Was there some, I don't know, last straw, some news event that outraged you so much that you decided, no, now I will write about it?
You know, it was a news event when people started being forced into the Max Messenger. They started blocking Telegram, and people were forcibly deprived of access to medical services. So there was this thing that appeared in the government services portal that if you didn't register in the Max Messenger, you would be blocked for 72 hours. So basically it was a fascist thing in essence. That is, just to force people into the Max Messenger, they were deprived of medical services. Then there was also something about children where they forced unfortunate parents into all these chats that they had to be in Mac specifically and not in Telegram. So, well, I already realized that when it comes to children, that's sacred. It's just unbearable. And that was the last straw for me.
You can have any opinion you want about Remeslo. You can remember his role in the harassment of Navalny, in campaigns against the opposition, in informing, in serving the repressive machine. But if a person is sent to a psychiatric hospital for a political statement, that's no longer a matter of liking or disliking a particular individual. This is a question about the nature of the regime. Because a state governed by the rule of law has no right to treat someone for their political opinions. If he has committed a crime, press charges, present evidence, provide a defense, and hold an open trial. If he is simply criticizing the authorities, respond politically. Debate, refute, run in elections.
The mildest thing you said was that you called Putin an illegitimate president. Looking back now, do you feel any regret about that post and those words addressed to Vladimir Vladimirovich?
I only regret that I didn't quite place the emphasis correctly. That is, I focused more on some kind of personal animosity, although in reality, in my opinion, we should be fighting Putinism as a phenomenon.
In an interview with Ksenia Sobchak, Remeslo says that from the mid-2010s until the end of 2025, he cooperated with the administration of the President of Russia. According to him, he earned on average about $10,000 a month from this. He calls these projects aimed at fighting the opposition. About 70% of these projects, he claims, were connected with Navalny, the rest with other opposition figures. And this is also a very important recognition.
Ilya, I would very much like to pose a deeply significant and serious question to you. Considering the fact that we are all now painfully aware of how Alexei Navalny's fate ended, do you find yourself personally feeling a heavy sense of responsibility or perhaps a profound guilt today for your specific role in initiating this truly horrific and tragic sequence of events that eventually led to Alexei's death?
I feel very sorry for Navalny. And no person deserves to die in the conditions in which he died, that is, in that terrible prison. I had very strong emotions. I mean, I genuinely felt sorry for him. I kept hoping until the very end that he would be rescued, that he would be exchanged or something like that. Yes, I do feel guilty, but I can also say something in my defense. I literally did everything I could to prevent his return to Russia. When all this was happening, that is, when it became known that he might return, I suggested an idea to the administration. I said, look, you don't want any problems with him, right? And what does he care, really? Let's scare him. I'll also write now that I've prepared another report. That's really how it was, that something was filed against him, right? And that if he comes back, it will definitely be carried out. And the administration approved all of this. I published all of this everywhere. And then people started spreading it in the comments, all sorts of bots started. And Volkov saw it and he said, I can't find his comments anymore, but somewhere in the replies he wrote something like, Remeslo has been turned upside down, so they're trying to scare us, which means nothing will actually happen.
But actually it had exactly the opposite effect, you see?
And that was a mistake, really, because by then it should have been clear that I'm not a simple person. I have certain contacts, I have resources, and so on. To be honest, through my connections and contacts, I even wrote to Navalny's people, warning them that Alexei shouldn't come back because there would definitely be a trial here.
For many years, Russian propaganda has been telling people that the entire fight against the opposition is a natural reaction of society, as if some active citizens themselves file complaints, expose things, get outraged, and defend the state on their own. And then one of these people comes out and calmly says, yes, these were Kremlin projects that I participated in. Yes, there was money. Yes, there was the presidential administration. Yes, there were assignments. Yes, fighting the opposition was a paid activity. And here the entire myth of popular outrage collapses. Because what we see is not public indignation, but an industry of political harassment, not spontaneous civic activism, but a paid mechanism for destroying reputations, exerting criminal pressure, fabricating pretexts, and filing denunciations. But in the story of Remeslo, something else is especially important. From the very beginning, he himself was not a victim of this system. He was a participant in it, he helped it function. But this very change is telling because Putin's system is built in such a way that sooner or later it makes even those who serve it start to think. It is so cruel, so deceitful, so absurd, that at some point even its own former soldiers begin to realize, tomorrow this machine could come for them too. And this perhaps is the main lesson of this story. Putin's system knows no gratitude. It is useless to serve it in the hope of protection. Today you are useful, you get paid, you get access, you get assignments. Tomorrow you say the wrong thing and the police and the psychiatric team are already on their way to you. Today you are fighting the enemies of the state. Tomorrow the state decides that the enemy is you.
But at that time, I want to say that I really believed in all of this. And at the time when I started doing this, the country was still somewhat different. That is, we had no war, we didn't have a complete break in relations with the West. There was a lot we didn't have, well, a lot of things just weren't there. That is, there weren't so many foreign agents, there weren't repressions against the media. I mean, even Navalny was walking free for quite a long time, right? And in general, I was quite satisfied with that state because I saw in it the possibility that there was competition, and if there is political competition, then that means I could also be interesting there, useful, able to do something, somehow engage with all these opposition movements. But in the end, it turned out that such a state was not enough for Putin, and he started tightening the screws. And so we have come to what we are dealing with now.
That is precisely why any dictatorship ultimately devours its own. First, it comes for the open opponents, then for independent journalists, then for human rights activists, then for business, then for officials, and eventually, it will come even for those who just yesterday were writing denunciations in its favor. Because in such a system, there is no law. There is only proximity to power and the degree of current usefulness. And when usefulness ends, so do the guarantees. In the interview, Remeslo says that he does not intend to leave, has no patrons in power, and plans to continue his opposition activities. When asked how he plans to do this in modern Russia without ending up in prison, he does not give a clear answer.
Well, a person who was still working in the media in Russia, while at the same time saying everything you said about Putin, which I can't even repeat on my broadcast, and then saying, I'm not ready to sacrifice myself, I'm not Navalny, just can't do that. Because what you did, the very fact that you are alive and free, is already a miracle in itself. So it's strange. Well, if you take step A, you have to be fully prepared for step B, but you say, I'm not ready to sacrifice myself. So, I mean, do you really think that after everything you've said, it's actually possible in today's Russia to keep doing something and remain free?
I think it's possible. See, I'm still here. Why not? It's just that not everything, not every case fits into our stereotypes. You see, I go a little bit beyond those stereotypes. It happens. Well, that's just how it turned out, I guess.
Can he be fully trusted? That's an open question. Can his past be forgotten? No, it can't. Should he bear moral and, if there are grounds, legal responsibility for participating in political persecution? Absolutely, yes. But at the same time, we need to see the bigger picture. This is not just the biography of one blogger. This is a diagnosis of an era. And this diagnosis is terrifying. A state that declares its critics insane has long since lost touch with reality itself. This was Ivan Doloto with my own project about freedom and human rights in Russia. I would appreciate donations in cryptocurrency. Your support will allow me to do my work better and be as useful to society as possible.